Good evening. I call to order the virtual study session of the Lakewood City Council on July 21st, 2025 at 7:05 p.m. To connect to the council meeting online, you can use one of the following links, either lakewoodspeaks.org or lakewood.org/council videos. For online public comments, you may post public comments of any links to lakewoodspeaks.org. That is our online forum for public comments. It will be left open overnight tonight and through 10 a.m. tomorrow for any comments related to tonight's presentation. On Lakewood Speaks, you'll also find that there is supporting documentation that will be potentially helpful as we're moving through this evening's conversation as well. We'll start us off this evening if the city clerk will please call the roll.
Mayor Strom.
Here.
Councilors Cruz, I.
Here.
Cruz, K.
Here.
Furman.
Here.
LeBure.
Here.
Lowe.
Here.
Mayock Guerrero.
Here.
Nystrom.
Here.
Ryan.
Here.
Sharzai.
Here.
And Sinks.
Here.
Great. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Okay, thank you so much. So from here we have, I don't know, we'll call it a fairly open dialogue. We've got a couple of primary agenda items this evening. We'll hit on what I think might be the easiest one first, and then we'll shift over to a conversation that is surrounding the potential genesis of a sustainability committee of our city council committee. So wanted to first, though, the idea to do this conversation this evening, I believe, originally started with the idea of, hey, sustainability committee. This is something that we want to talk a little bit more about, potentially implement for council. And then at the same time, things were moving along. We're identifying other areas within other council committees, boards, commissions that needed to be addressed. So this became a good opportunity to put everything, roll it all together and address a number of the items all at the same time. So with that, what you guys have noticed at this point, most likely, hopefully, in your packets for this evening, is our city attorney, Allison McKinney-Brown, has gone through chapter 2 of our policies and procedures. We updated policies and procedures last year, but didn't really spend a lot of time around that scope of what our boards and commissions are. So Allison McKinney-Brown had gone through looking through policies and procedures, like what are questions that we've had come up, what are some challenges that we've had come up across our committees, and what kind of standardization can we look at to make sure that our committees are operating in a more standard way and also operating in a more standard way in alignment with the way we as city council work as well. So she went through, saved us, I think, a lot of time this evening, and went through the policies and procedures section relating to the committees to start a red line draft of those ideas that will help get us to these committees being more, operations in alignment with each other, so it's clearer, and then also more in alignment with the way city council works. So what we will do is tonight, I'd like to have a brief conversation about what you've seen so far. And then Mayor Pro Tem and myself will be working with Ms. McKinney-Brown as we move forward to finalize that quote unquote draft. And then it would eventually obviously come back to the city council for more of a conversation and a vote. So that's that portion of our conversation this evening. Curious if, as you guys were reading through any of it, do we have any questions, thoughts, or feedback on that section before we move forward to the conversation around sustainability committee? Councilor Nystrom.
Yeah, just a quick question, and this may have been just a miss on my part, but under, excuse me, the 2-term limit for service on boards of commissions, letter C, it has the Board of Appeals under there. Was that intentional?
Yes, that was intentional.
Okay.
I think you want to ask me some more questions about that, but I'm not sure what that is.
Well, it's a change from the previous document, right? So I guess I'm just curious about why that change is being made, or again, maybe there's a conversation that I didn't hear. I'm just curious.
It's not a change from the previous document. The previous document used a table, and when other members of staff were doing a read over of the work I had done, they suggested the table was hard to read. The table had 6 call outs, one of which was Board of Appeals. And instead of putting them in the 6 call out section, we just listed them out so people could just see them more clearly. The city clerk wanted to add in one of those. And honestly, I don't remember which one it was, but it was correct and fine. So 6 of those, including the Board of Appeals, are in the existing section of this code.
Okay, thanks.
Councilor Ryan.
I was hoping legal could just talk a moment about the addition of the ad hoc committee or the ad hoc option, which I'm very appreciative that you guys did add that. That was something that I've heard from the historic committee, for example, and I know the LAC, that was a tool that we used until it was brought to our attention that maybe that might be problematic.
We've had several committees that have wanted to work with ad hoc committees, which is just subcommittees within the Border Commission. And there really is no authorization for that under any of the enabling legislation of current boards and commissions. The LAC really wanted to work with an executive board and was struggling with what that would mean. And I think there's been a couple of times even the Planning Commission has said, look, we need to look into something. We've got 14 meetings this month. It'd be nice if we would break that down a little bit and do the research and bring it back to the group. So we wanted to build in that it would be okay to do ad hoc committees that are appointed by the Border Commission, but what the authority of that ad hoc committee would be. So everyone would understand that an ad hoc committee can't make decisions for the Border Commission. They're not authorized to do that. And those meetings are open to the public. So there is no setting an ad hoc committee at 2 people so that the public could not be present. So we just wanted to make it clear that if you want to do an ad hoc committee because that'll make some type of project more easy for the Border Commission, that's great, but it will remain open to the public.
Oh, thank you for adding that. I think that's really a helpful tool.
All right, any more questions or feedback on policies and procedures chapter 2 before we move on to our second agenda item this evening? Okay, so seeing none, we'll go ahead and transition over to our conversation with regards to sustainability.
Mayor, can I just make a comment real quick?
Okay.
Sorry, I know I'm a little late. I was looking for the text to make sure I wasn't screwing up what I was saying, but I did notice, it's not a huge deal, but I did notice there's some sort of gender references in this ordinance. Might take a look at just getting rid of those as a copy edit thing. Says things like he shall be, so I just wanted to mention that. Anyway, thanks.
Received, thank you. Okay, so as far as sustainability committee goes, we'll sit back for the public. I would give a little bit of an exclamation or an explanation here. So this year during our city council's annual planning retreat, the conversation came up about implementing a sustainability committee within council to start to look deeper at some of these issues that councilors might like to implement across our city. So that's where the idea came up, and we got that agendaed well, a little bit slower than normal because we've had so much pleasure moving through the zoning code this year. So we're a little slow on that, but excited to be here this evening to talk about this potential new committee here on the Lakewood City Council. So as you can imagine, there's a number of things that we do need to sort through as we're trying to define what that committee is, how it's structured. So I have a number of questions that we'll just kind of pose, and we'll need to find some consensus on as we move forward. Like, how many people are on it? What is, who comprises of the committee? What are the terms? That type of thing. How are they selected? Things like that. These are all the questions that we'll need to start with as we move forward, and then we'll ultimately adopt, I believe, via ordinance, the actual committee itself. So that would be done in a traditional regular business meeting. So I will just open it up to everybody. The first question I would have is, who's on it? Who's on it? Do we want it just city council? Are we looking at other community members? I will say before we start that conversation that there are some concerns within city staff that there likely would be very much duplication of having the sustainability committee on the LAC as we have one now, and also having a council committee. So that is something that we want to think about as we move through this conversation too. Do we like having both? Is that duplicative? We have to also acknowledge within that we're looking at staff time to support both of those. So what we need to determine, do we want staff time spent that way, or do we prefer to have staff time spent in a different way? So we've got a hand up, so I'll go ahead and start to take questions from everybody and hear thoughts, and we'll start recording things. But that's where we are first, is who is on the committee? Councilor Six.
Thank you. I don't really have an answer to who is on the committee, because for me, I can't answer that question until I have a clearer picture of the goals, of the actions that this committee will take. So for example, will this committee work with sustainable neighborhoods? So I don't have a clear picture of what the committee will do and how they will function, and therefore I don't know how many and who and all of that. So I don't know, maybe I missed something and somebody can list off or point me to where we have a list of tasks that this committee would be in charge of. Thanks.
Thank you. Maybe let's start with, as far as council goes. So yes, I believe everybody that was interested in this desired it to be a committee that city councilors are sitting on. Are we all fairly consistent on that? We want city councilors on this committee, correct? Okay, so lots of nods there, so thank you. Then we need to decide, and maybe we come back to this, but we've got some committees that are 3 city councilors. We have some committees that have a counselor from every single ward. So that's also a decision that we need to make tonight. The question then becomes, do we have 5 counselors that are willing to sit on this committee, that feel like they have the time to commit to it, not only this year, but in future years? So something to think about. Councilor Isabel Cruz, did you still have a question?
I was just going to make a comment on my preferences on that, but if we're still framing, happy to hold.
I'd say go for it, because no one else is talking at the moment. So
okay, great. Yes, I think, to me, when I supported this idea at our retreat, the goal was, right, I think we've had a lot of conversation about how to move forward positive momentum and legislation regarding sustainability, but it's hard without sort of like the equivalent of a housing policy commission or a legislative, a targeted forum through which to do that. And so that, I think, to me is different than what the Lakewood Advisory Commission is doing. I think that they're, mostly responding to requests, sometimes generating requests, but I think to me, with like capacity, I think having 3 counselors on it would be totally fine. And I think because anything would have to come to be kind of debated by our group anyway. And I think that that would be helpful to make it a nimble group, unless there's a lot of folks who would, to me, 3 is a floor. I don't feel some type of way about that. But the other piece is, I know there was some interest, if I remember correctly, from some folks who are on the sustainability committee from the LAC to be interfacing with council. And I think we heard loud and clear from the LAC annual report that they're interested in more ways to have some more interaction with council and understand how their research is helpful or not helpful. And so I could see this as a format with which somebody, a representative of that committee, could either be a guest or be a sitting member, depending on the way of the logistics of putting that together.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Matt Guerrero.
I think I have very, very similar points, which is the hope is that it's more policy making. The LIC does tend to do studies and also just can only move at the pace that they can. And I think that this is a large enough issue with enough of our priorities that are in it where we need a space. I think some of the things that have come up are within multimodal transportation, improving our bike plans, improving our like natural corridors, thinking about water uses within our own parks, energy and water within our own buildings, working on the enhanced development menu, which obviously will need to be full city council, but probably if we're doing a significant update, needs like some more in the weeds work. And I visualize it, I think, a little bit more like how the HPC worked, which is, you know, it was difficult as it was essentially newly defined in the last couple of years, but wanting to figure out and help prioritize some of those sustainability values and like how to actually get there, that we keep talking about making sure we're taking steps. And I think that is really different than something that the LAC could do. The LAC just doesn't, they have good influence, they're very important, but I don't think that they have the hard power required to drive some of the policy priorities that should be coming out in the next year or so.
Okay, thank you. Councilor LeBeer.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll try to answer, I guess, a couple questions you mentioned. One on size. I mean, I've always wondered, you know, if we have to be as sort of monolithic or strict about, you know, the structure of a committee. I've never actually asked our city attorney or others if there's just a way to be a little bit more nimble and just having it more open where, you know, whoever has an interest in being on it and has the time is able to be on it. I don't have an answer to that, but to me, you know, if there's a lot of interest, then I say make it bigger. And if there's not as much interest, make it smaller. And I'm kind of indifferent in that way. So that in terms of size, that's my 2 cents. But then, you know, what's the role of it? Just think everybody has already kind of touched on it, but I'll just kind of reiterate. I think the goal is to, you know, make sure that the things that are council actions related to the sustainability plan that's already in place, make sure that, you know, the council is able to ensure that those actions are moving forward. And then also we obviously just recently did a, you know, climate action study. But I think what didn't come out of that is a climate action plan to actually, you know, turn some of these concepts into actual policies. And then making sure that we're just hitting, you know, measurable targets, you know, and that the council's sort of actively engaged in creating policies to help meet those targets. Because some of these things are going to be required to be changes in law. So I think that's all kind of obvious, but I just wanted to reiterate that. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. McKinney-Brown, did you have a response to the question about nimbleness?
Yes. It depends on the form that this committee takes. If you begin with an ad hoc committee, which the city council can make quickly by motion or resolution, you can develop that any way you want to develop that. Although an ad hoc committee can't include members of the community, it's limited to members of the city council. Those typically are small committees of about 3 people, and oftentimes the mayor will say, hey, raise your hand if you want to be one of the 3 members. If you're going to do a permanent committee, those are created by ordinance, and they are placed within the code. And because they're being placed within the code and created by ordinance, they need to establish who the members are actually going to be. And again, a pretty common pattern for this city is to say 1 member from each ward, but that you're not married to that. You can choose a different option, but because you're going to need to pre-establish who is going to be on that committee in writing, it's not going to be self-select. So again, if you want to do a short-term ad hoc and kind of get a feel for what this committee is going to do in advance of setting up as a permanent committee, that would start you out rather nimbly, but it would also give you an idea of how you're going to do this permanently.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Nystrom.
Yeah, I think during the discussions on this, and when I spoke to counselors about it individually, that was kind of the mindset. The capacity was a concern. And so a lot of people had stated that if they had the capacity and were interested, then join the committee. But if they didn't have the capacity, that's okay. Well, we now have a full council as well. So that gives us an opportunity to look at that and, just figure out who's comfortable being on board. And we talked about some key strategic things in the planning session. And, those are things that we need to do follow on with, as Councilor Maya Guerrero said, the looking at the EDM, but also multimodal initiatives as it ties into transportation overall for the city. But there's, we've got some pretty good stuff laid out here. And I think it's just, we also have the opportunity to interface with the Housing Policy Committee as well as LAC as needed. So.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Furman and then Councilor Isabel Cruz.
Yeah, I think Councilor Isabel's all right. So some of the efforts towards this, I think, occurred before I was on council, so I don't know the exact details. But one of the things I was interested in is how council is interfaced with the city in regards to things like dealing with the state legislation around high performance buildings. I was part of the advisory committee when I was on planning commission. I was part of the advisory committee that was looking at how the city was going to implement either the minimum or what they were going to go above and beyond for building performance. And the reason I'm asking about this specifically, though, is general in the sense that I want to understand how the policy is, I think, critically important, but also there are activities ongoing that essentially are decisions being made, and how those advisory committees are interfacing with the current council and how they would interface with the sustainability committee. For example, with the high performance building advisory committee, how did they interface with the council previously? I just want to, I'm throwing the question out generally. I'm not sure if someone has an answer, but well, in lieu of an answer, I guess what I will say is I think the two pieces of this that are most important is exactly that, how the committee is able to prioritize policy efforts, because I think the one thing that I get worried about is trying to take on everything and getting nothing done. I will say I know there are efforts that we're going to be required to do because there's state legislation around building energy use. And the discussions around how much above and beyond we go as a city on that, I think that alone is a big question, and how we prioritize, I guess, subsidizing individuals' ability to meet those if we lower the goal threshold much lower than say the 50,000 the state requires or 25,000 square foot is required by some of the other cities. Sorry if this feels like a bit of a tangent, but I think the buildings energy use is going to be a critical one. So.
Thank you. Councillor Isabel Cruz.
Thanks. Recognizing that I have spoken once already, I just wanted to maybe throw out there or maybe understand like the ad hoc versus permanent committee structure. I think part of, you know, it sounds like there is some level of interest in like flexibility or figuring out how this goes, and potentially like starting with an ad hoc committee could give us an opportunity to learn what we want to learn, and then we can formalize a committee. But I just don't totally understand if there are any downsides to how such a committee could help inform our policy making or have the authority to, you know, have the clout to work with staff to get the information necessary to move things forward. So I just wanted to better understand that, because it sounds like the ad hoc structure could be a way to meet the need that we're all voicing.
Ms. McKinney-Brown, is that a question you can answer?
Sorry, I was battling my computer while you guys had.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Could you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, I think Allison.
Were you?
Yeah, I think Allison
Would
needs
you
the
be
question
able
repeated.
to answer Councillor Cruz's question about, well, like the difference between an ad hoc committee and a permanent committee, and are there downsides to starting maybe with permanent when maybe if we started with ad hoc, we might be able to give ourselves a little more flexibility?
Certainly.
Did I paraphrase that right?
Yeah, the only thing I would just, is there a downside to an ad hoc committee with regard to like the capacity necessary to move forward policy to conversations, or anything that would help us get to moving the conversation forward in a more concerted capacity?
Okay. I apologize, my computer froze. I was having the hardest time getting it to turn back on. So the benefit of an ad hoc committee is it is nimble, as Councilmember LeBure was saying. It lets you start small. It lets people who are particularly interested self-select onto it if that's the way the council wants to work. And it lets a smaller group of people work their way through exactly what's going to be happening with the committee. For example, and I'm just throwing out ideas. I am not trying to create a roadmap for any of you, but if it's really important to the city council to try to figure out how this new council level committee is going to interact with maybe the LAC. This would be a great time for working through those details and figuring that out. And so at the end of an established period of time, ad hoc committees are typically a year or less. That committee could come back and say, we discovered that this works well and this works well, but this doesn't work. And that way, when we create the ordinance, we're working from a point of actual experience. The downside of an ad hoc committee is it has less authority because nobody's quite sure what they're doing. They are building the bridge themselves. If you want this committee to start right out feeling like they have the authority, the same level of authority that other committees have, you're probably going to want to set this out within an established committee. And that way everybody understands what they're doing and how they're supposed to get there. So one gets you there quicker, but one gets you there maybe with a little bit more experience and knowledge about what you want to do. Did that answer the question, council member?
I think mostly just the authority piece. Like, would an ad hoc committee on sustainability have less of an ability to get the information necessary from staff or from other stakeholders regarding policy initiatives to move forward?
I don't think so. And of course, you get to set that forward in your resolution that would create the ad hoc committee. But some of the more recent ad hoc committees that you've done is you had an ad hoc committee to redo the policies and procedures, and those members of that committee worked with me. Honestly, we were working together every week for months. So no, you can establish what that's going to be. It's just, I think that there's more guessing going on, and I need to know. I think ad hoc committees play an important role of giving people the experience prior to having to put things down into the code, because once you've adopted a code, it becomes, I think, a little bit more of a hurdle to go back and change. So if you want to give them a certain amount of authority, the city council can certainly do that within their resolution.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, thank you. I would just advocate for the ad hoc committee, and some of the reasons that have already been expressed. I think what is clear from the conversation over the last 2 planning retreats is that we wouldn't be going backwards. Like if we adopted an ad hoc committee focused on sustainability and it had a makeup of 3 members or whatever that configuration is, and they define that, I don't see a world where this body would come back and say, okay, that we're done with that topic and let's, move that off. So for me, it gives us a chance to refine what those goals are, because I think even in the question tonight, it wasn't super clear. We all have a couple of ideas of what we'd like to see this committee do. I think Councillor Furman's question is a great example. Like we never really heard from that body. Councillor Furman, I think, is the answer that you were looking for. And having a smaller committee allows for those opportunities to recognize, like, we haven't heard from XYZ body that was doing this work, and they can convene those conversations in a way that helps inform them. One thing I would like to see from this committee is just similar to how maybe housing policy would be an example I'd look at, but taking a look at the retreat goals that have been focused on sustainability, and making some recommendations to us as a body before we go into our next planning retreat of, like, here are things that we know that we can prioritize and move forward really quickly. And, this arc of government. So I would want to right size those expectations, but it allows this group to dig in a little bit deeper and help inform that. And so that would be one thing that I would want to focus on. Yeah, so I think that for me is where I stand on this. And I hope that, I'm glad that we're having this conversation. I think that this is something that's come up a number of times. I don't have a great answer on whether it's 3 or 5, but I do think policies and procedures is a great example. That was a body of 3. It was a lot of work over many weeks that allowed us to really get in there and sort of answer some of the questions that needed to be answered. And we came back and really discussed that. I think we had multiple occasions where we refined that continuously. And so does 3 allow that to just happen? For those on screening committee, it is a challenge to get a body that to that size sort of scheduled with the cadence that this group would, I imagine, want to meet and discuss this topic. So that's it for me.
Could there maybe be an appetite from council to start as ad hoc with the possibility of shifting to a permanent committee at some point in the future after we figure some of these things out? I see 2 thumbs up, a couple of head nods. All right, all thumbs up. Ms. McKinney-Brown, with that being said, are there any follow-up questions that I should be asking on the ad hoc committee?
Generally, it would be helpful to me to know as I create, and it's just going to be a resolution, so it's something that can be modified when it's brought back for the city council to approve. But it'd be generally helpful if there's anything within the resolution that the members of the city council would like to include, like will this be 3 members of staff? 3 members of staff, 3 members of the city council. Are we going to include specific names, or should we leave that open and fill that in on the night? What exactly is the goal of this committee? And again, it doesn't have to be too specific, but to know that the goal is to work with the LAC or build out a plan for a long-term sustainability committee, or what is it exactly that this committee, what is it generally that this committee should be working on over the next length of time? And the last thing is, how long do you want this ad hoc committee to function prior to them bringing back their report and beginning the conversation about establishing the permanent committee?
Okay, thank you. So let's talk about, you mentioned we could have an open blank, fill in the blank on the night of. I'm not seeing a high level of conviction on specific numbers from everybody tonight. Is everybody open to the idea of kind of thinking through 3 members, 5 members, whatever, and bringing forward on the night of? Does anyone feel pretty solid on something now and want to start the conversation on that tonight? Councilor LeBure.
I don't have anything solid on that, but I was just thinking if you did a quick poll of who had an interest of being on the committee, that might give a little insight into how big it should be or that. I don't know. Just my thought.
Yeah, we could certainly try that. By raise of hand, if you'd be interested and have the time available to serve on that committee, who might that be this evening? Okay, so
I would be, but obviously it would be a short amount of time. It doesn't make sense. So I just want to recognize that that's not necessarily zero interest from Ward 2.
Thank you for interjecting that. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I would just notice that every ward, but Ward 1 councilors, they raise their hand. So if that is the way, like if it keeps us from, having to make some decisions on who's on and who's off, like I'm sure that between Councilor Sinks and I, we can figure out who would represent it. We do determine that one from each ward is the best way to go. But I would still advocate for 3.
Councilor Sinks.
Yeah, if I am not on the committee, I would still feel like I have some input. So a person doesn't have to be on the committee to have input. And so I know our colleagues, of course, also talk to us that are not on committees, and we're by no means excluded if we're not on a committee. So I feel very fine with an ad hoc committee of 3 as well.
Councilor Lowe?
Yeah, Mayor, if you want me to just park this for a couple minutes, that's totally fine, but this seemed topical. The one question I had maybe related to this, and if folks just don't want to get into this tonight, that's totally fine. Really, I 100% think we need to create this committee. I'm glad we're doing it. I think it's a priority. I think there's some priority stuff. I guess I just want to raise the question of, like, we did review a list of committees and there's a long list. And I think part of the factor here is, like, we all have quite a few thick commitments, and I think most of us are on a number of different committees. And I at least speak, like, I'm so grateful that Councilor K. Cruz is raising his hand, but so part of the reason I didn't is just like, I'm interested in this, but I don't feel like I have the capacity to add another committee to my dance card right now. So I just want to raise the question of, like, are there committees that we actually don't need? The answer to that may well be no. I am not nominating a committee to, like, X, or none jumps out at me, but I just wanted to ask the question, like, is there a committee or two that is a holdover from many years ago? Probably not one of the standing committees involving all 5 wards, but maybe one of the ones where we like appoint one person where we actually don't need it. And maybe that frees up a little bit of time and bandwidth since we're now creating this new important priority committee.
Do we need sister cities?
Honestly, that was the one that occurred to me. I'm not gonna lie.
We're not getting rid of sister cities. I'm looking through the list. I don't think there's any that we have any. I mean, Head Start obviously is that has gone away. So that's not one that will be in the list this year. So if you think about it, this kind of replaces that one.
Sure.
Counselor Isabel Cruz.
Yeah, I was going to potentially ask about the Head Start committee, but and I saw probably Counselor Sinks was looking to talk about that too. I also wonder, is there anything that would prevent, like there were 4 counselors who are interested? To me, I feel sort of agnostic. I mean, obviously I want North Lakewood represented. I want my ward represented. I think if Sophia wants to, or sorry, Counselor Mayat Guerrero wants to serve in her last time, like I think that would be awesome. But I also don't feel like excluding people for arbitrary numbers. So I would just advocate for whoever being interested being a part of it.
Thank you. Counselor Nystrom and Counselor Ryan and Counselor Furman.
I'm not going to belabor the point. I agree with what Counselor Cruz just said. That's exactly what I was gonna state. So.
Oh, Counselor Ryan, no? Okay. Counselor Furman, you're up.
Sorry, my mute doesn't work very fast. All I was going to say is, I'm interested in that committee, and I think it's, I think I have things I can contribute. However, also, if a 3-person committee is nimble and fast, I would rather see them be nimble and efficient if that's a preferred route. So I am comfortable with whatever the outcome is. My point being is I don't want it to be burdened by a number either. So.
Councilor LeBeer.
I just wanted to answer Allison's other question about what is the committee doing. I think it could probably be somewhat vague about researching and recommending policies or ordinances that improve sustainability. That's just my thought.
Thank you. Okay, so for number of people, we need to start landing on something. I would say, it seems like people are fairly open to just as an ad hoc committee, whoever wants to be on it is on it. So we start that way for now, understanding that as we move forward with permanent, that could likely shift, but for the time being, we'll just go with self-selecting in. Does that sound good to everybody? Nods, okay, perfect, thank you. Then the question is, how long? What was the context of how long? I just wrote this down and completely forgot what we were talking about.
How long the committee, ad hoc committee would last.
Oh, yeah, okay. So, I mean, we appoint committee members every January. I'm wondering, Ms. McKinney-Brown, can we do ad hoc for now and then reauthorize with new people in January, continuing to be ad hoc, or do we need to make it permanent at that point maybe?
Typically with the ad hoc committees, we bring a new resolution to you annually to recreate them annually. So if in January, the city council was still wanting to maintain this as an ad hoc committee, that is totally within your discretion. And if at that point you as a body feel that you're ready to begin developing the language for the ordinance, creating the final or the long term, that's an option too. I don't think you have to box yourself in on that, but it would the time thing is, should we plan on this being a 6-month committee, like through, I don't know, through January 2026, or should we just authorize it for a year?
I feel like authorizing it for a year gets us weirdly off track, off cycle. Does anybody oppose the idea of authorizing this until January, until we redo all names of all committees and then we re-up this one? So I think that no head shakes to me seems like we're fine with that. Okay, can we give me a thumbs up if we're fine with just authorizing it for the rest of the year, and then we'll turn it around in January? Okay, so for those of you that are doing your little shaky hands, I need to hear some voices. Mayor Pro Tem, do you have something about this topic or something else?
About this
Okay,
topic.
we'll go with you and then Councilor Lowe.
I just wanted to make sure I understood the process that was just laid out. So we would authorize it now, and then in January, just to ensure that we stay on track, it would be another process where we could reauthorize the ad hoc, then thereby just calendaring it annualized with the rest of folks. Because I want to just make sure that I'm not understanding that in January we're having this conversation again, like, should we keep this committee? Because I think we're all committed to it going longer. Just want to make sure that it's more of just getting us on the calendar as just like a ceremonial vote in January.
I will say mayor's perspective, yes. I would ask for city attorney's perspective.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. My computer says I'm still muted, but I don't think I am. Okay, yeah, Mayor, as that was stated by yourself and the Mayor Pro Tem, that's absolutely fine. Again, the nice thing with an ad hoc committee is it gives you a lot of flexibility that you don't have with a permanent committee.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Lowe.
Sorry, Mayor, I would change my wiggly hands to a thumbs up then.
Okay. Oh, couple. Yep, Councilor Lowe.
Yeah, I don't feel strongly about this. So I really, particularly on how to set up the committees, I frankly defer to you, Mayor. I mean, it just strikes me like inevitably, particularly when you think about like how busy the next few months are going to be for everyone, budget cycle, zoning, then we hit the holidays. Like, I just think the ad hoc committee is going to need a year to do its work. So like, yeah, if the idea is it's a quick sort of rubber stamp, yep, we're extending this in January and you'd prefer to do it that way, that's fine. But it also strikes me like, given that we think this is probably a year of work, you could just like authorize it for a year with the idea that like, then we come back in a year and decide whether we're creating a permanent committee at that point. But however you want to do it, I do think this is more than like 5 months of work realistically.
Absolutely. Okay, so now that we've got that discussed, thumbs up if you're okay with us doing ad hoc through January and then re-upping it when we do everything else in January. All right. Okay, thank you. And then next thing mentioned was our goal. We heard a lot of things on that. And I'm wondering if it might be possible to maybe start with, I believe, I can't remember who might have mentioned this earlier, but the Housing Policy Committee and bringing forward, helping to identify and prioritizing council goals for housing. This would be the exact same thing, identifying and help to prioritize council goals within the context of sustainability. And we start with that. I know that's small, but it's also very like quick and efficient. People understand what that is. And then giving the committee, if we want to elaborate, come up with, mission statements or whatever on what we want to focus on later, we can certainly do that. But for tonight, the purpose of tonight, how we all feel about that. I'm going to leave that question on the table and then we'll let the hands come up. Councilor Matt Guerrero.
So I think that that's basically it. I would just want to clarify the context of the HPC we had, the strategic housing plan, and like priorities within our strategic plan as a council. And so that was the context that we started from, and the recommendations that we essentially went through those things and prioritized and went out as a group. And then that's the memo that we brought to council to say, are these the right first three things? And so I think for whoever ends up leading that committee, if we're a little bit more explicit about what context already exists. So I think what the LAC is already working on, the sustainability plan, our sustainability priorities, and probably our like potentially also our like transportation or bike plans. I would actually want to like enumerate that they're like that they should be operating under those contexts. Not that that's then fully binding, but it's sustainability like housing. I think so much of our trouble in our first 6 months was that it was so immense and so vast. And so just relying on the work that we've actually already done is really critical. It prevents you from kind of just reinventing the wheel. And so I offer that as whoever ends up chairing that committee. That was hard, but we're a lot better at it now. So like learn the lessons from the HPC's genesis. But also I think it would be wise for us to enumerate some of that within the resolution.
Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts? Ms. McKinney-Brown, do you feel like you might have enough to work with on that topic?
Yeah. Yes, I absolutely do feel like I have enough to work with on that topic. So I can get a draft resolution put together. I will get it to the city manager, and she can get it onto the agenda as allowed.
Okay, thank you. Back to the question of composition of the committee. Are we talking about this just being city council members? Councilor Nystrom and then Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I think for the ad hoc committee, it should just be council members, because again, we can sync up with LAC and HPC as needed. But to hit the ground running, I think that would be the best way to go.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yep, I agree with that. I think that having it be just council, there are other bodies in which citizens can have a voice in this work, and ways we can have a liaison. So,
Councilor Ryan.
I think I heard from legal that we can't have citizens unless it's a permanent. I don't know if we can have citizens if it's an ad hoc. So I think the question, if we're going to have an ad hoc, I think we are restricted to just councilors.
That's true. If you're going to use citizen appointees, you have to go through the screening committee. Sorry, I am so fighting my computer tonight. So if you're going to do it an ad hoc, it is by default just city council members.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's see, I'm looking at my notes. I feel like that's all the questions that I had thought. Ms. Hodson, of our conversations and anything else, can you think of any more that we need to sort through tonight?
No, I really can't. I thought that was really productive. And I have 4 people that raised their hand. Should I review those? I have Nystrom, K. Cruz, Furman, and LeBure. Those are the 4 that raised their hands. Is that right? Okay. Yeah, so we'll make sure that's in the resolution.
Okay.
So no, I think you're good.
All right, so I think what I'm hearing is that we're ready to move on to committee reports. That seems amazingly fast, you all, that we went through. I knew tonight would be a short-ish night, but that I didn't expect that conversation to go as quickly as it did. So thank you everybody for chiming in. I'll open the floor to committee reports. Any committees that have reports to bring forward tonight? Councilor Spinks.
Thank you. So we are awaiting word from the Office of Head Start regarding the grant. And once we hear about the grant, the Jefferson County Head Start Director and our staffer, Brent Berninger, they're in constant contact. So once we hear from the Office of Head Start, we'll be able to be very quick and nimble. That's kind of the phrase for tonight, isn't it? And the official announcement will be made as to Jefferson County Head Start taking over our piece of the grant. So it will be very quick once DC gets their act together. Oh, thank you.
Any other committee reports? Okay. Councilor Lowe, did I just see your hand go up? No? Okay. Okay. All right. Then with that, that's all we have this evening. So seeing no further business, I will go ahead and adjourn this study session at 8:01 p.m. Have a good night, everybody. We'll see you next week.